Chair, there's a strike everything amendment to House Bill 2671 that I'd be happy to explain.
There is? Yes, please explain.
Madam Chair and members, the strike everything amendment in the Chair's name dated March 22nd, 2019 at 2:08 p.m. classifies as a Class 5 felony intentionally or knowingly subjecting a domestic animal to cruel mistreatment or killing a domestic animal. Additionally, the amendment defines a domestic animal as a mammal not regulated by Title III that is kept primarily as a pet or companion or that is bred to be a pet or companion. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Members, questions? Great. Excellent job. Who do we have?
Good evening, Madam Chair.
Right.
Just following up on some of our missing members. Okay. Madam Chair, there are 3 people signed in to speak for the bill. The first is Brian Tussoneri with the Humane Legislative Coalition of Arizona.
Perfect.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members. Brian Tussoneri, a lot of partners on behalf of the Humane Legislative Coalition of Arizona. I will be brief. We support this bill as the strike amendment for a couple of reasons. First, an overview. There are 13 crimes of cruelty in Title 13, 2910, and cruel mistreatment is one of them. This bill does not change that definition. Cruel mistreatment is the most heinous form of mistreatment of animals. It's currently a felony 6. What this bill does is carve out a subset of what I shorthand call pets that would be subject to a higher penalty, and I'll make the case for that higher penalty in 2 ways. First, we think that we know that there's a correlation between abuse of pets and domestic violence. And so people that engage in this kind of behavior should not get a felony 6, which oftentimes is designated into a misdemeanor, which we think is problematic. Felony 5 is more likely to be supervised probation, more likely to remain a felony for these most serious types of abuse. And there are speakers that will follow that can give you a sense of how many cases we're talking about, but it's not a lot. And secondly, I just point out that in the law right now, and there's a case that illustrates this perfectly, for one class of animals, which is livestock, if you kill that a cow basically that belongs to somebody else, the sanction can be as high as a felony 5. And yet if you do the same thing to somebody's cat or dog, it can be a felony 6. And then last one point that I'd like to make to you, Madam Chair. We had a good discussion about chickens and whether they were mammals or not. And I assured you that because they lay eggs, they are not mammals. That's wrong. I want you to know that the long-beak echinidea from Papua New Guinea is a mammal that lays eggs.
Look at that.
So with that exception, I was correct.
Okay. Okay. Learning something every day. Okay, members, any questions?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I just wanted to make a comment and thank Brian. He and I spoke on the phone and discussed this in detail, and he resolved the concerns that I had, and the language solved those already. So,
okay, very good. That's good to know. Next speaker.
Thank you.
Up next is Rebecca Baker with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office speaking for the bill.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Rebecca Baker, and I'm the Legislative Liaison for the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. And we are here today in support of the Strike Everything Amendment. In recent years, my office has seen an escalation of violence in cases of animal cruelty. Case after case, time and time again, we are prosecuting incidents of people stomping, shooting, stabbing, burning animals to their death. These acts of violence are not only shocking, but they are very concerning for public safety. This legislation is narrowly tailored to address those particular type of offenses. The Maricopa County Attorney strongly believes that the current penalty in place is not adequate to address the harm done to pets, the loss suffered by animal owners, as well as the threat that these specific offenders pose to our community. Because the current penalty is a Class 6 felony, it can be and often is designated a misdemeanor offense. That makes it difficult to obtain a felony conviction. A felony conviction for these offenders is crucial because misdemeanor offenders are not placed on supervised probation. Getting offenders on supervised probation is an important step to assessing what interventions are necessary and needed to prevent recidivism. We know that animal abusers are 5 times more likely to commit violent crimes than non-abusers. We also know that they're 4 times more likely to go on and commit property offenses within our community. So early intervention by way of probation, supervision, and treatment are critical to preventing this escalation of violence and to preventing recidivism. With that, we ask for your support, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you. I do have a question. So currently, are a lot of these cases being pled down? I mean, why can't the charge of a Class 6 stay? Or maybe it is, could you speak to that?
I sure can. Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Under the criminal code, the first 2 Class 6 felonies that a person commits can be designated a misdemeanor by the court. So even if we refuse to plea the case, we take it to trial and we win, the court can still designate it a misdemeanor. And that's on the first 2 Class 6 felonies. So I'm not going to say that it isn't ever pled to a misdemeanor. There may be circumstances where we do enter into plea agreements. And most likely that might be because we know they're going to get a misdemeanor, even if it goes to trial.
Okay, well, that's helpful. Thank you, that makes sense. And members, additional questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. My question for you is, how many of these cases that you see with, this animal cruelty that are combined with other cases? So maybe, and I'm just thinking really of the stacked charges on these individuals. Do you see oftentimes that you're just going into trial with just this one count?
Madam Chair and Senator Neverett, I don't have a good answer for you. Before coming today, I was trying to dig down through our case management system into these cases to get some numbers. I know the numbers aren't large. There aren't a large number of animal cruelty cases that are brought, but those that we're talking about are very serious. How often they coexist with other charges, I'm going to have to do a little bit of research and get back to you, but I will do that and get back to the committee.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Baker.
Madam Chair, I do have a few more follow-up questions. And so it was mentioned earlier that a lot of these individuals that are committing these animal cruelty crimes oftentimes are already in some type of domestic violence. They're already violent individuals. Is there a better way to get help for these folks? Because obviously it's not normal to abuse an animal. But is there support prior to it reaching that level, or are these? I guess my concern is I don't want to just push this as another way to tack on additional charges when in reality the person that is committing these crimes probably needs some real help so that we can get them, from abusing children, abusing these animals and abusing other people so that they can be productive citizens. What is the county doing what is the county doing on that area?
Absolutely. Madam Chair, Senator Neverett, thank you for the question. Actually, we are in the process right now of setting up a diversion program for animal cruelty. There is a program in existence right now in Pima County. They have an animal court where some animal cruelty cases can go through a diversion process. What we envision here in Maricopa County would be a diversion program for misdemeanors and lower level animal cruelty offenses, and that would provide the education and treatment and assessment needed for offenders. On those cases that we're talking about, individuals who are, setting their girlfriend's cat on fire to intimidate her, those are not the type of cases that we envision going through diversion. Those are cases that we envision being prosecuted so that we can have ongoing probation supervision and the treatments that probation can provide.
Right, that makes sense. Are you good? Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes, please proceed.
The concern that I brought up to Brian, and I think I'm just going to bring it up to you, is if a minor, say a 16-year-old boy, lights his girlfriend's cat on fire, like you're saying, can he plead down below the felony 6? Or are we just going to try him as an adult? I know that happens quite often with 16-year-olds. They're tried as an adult and would end up being a lifelong felon because of this. Could you explain?
Yeah,
I can. Madam Chair, Senator Pace. So with juveniles, the system's very different. A juvenile who commits an act of animal cruelty with very limited circumstances would be prosecuted in the juvenile court. Now, the juvenile court treats his offenses very differently. Whereas in adult court, we have classes that have ranges. In juvenile court, the court has a wide variety of options that apply to all classification of offenses. So it doesn't matter if it's a 4, a 5, a 6 in juvenile court. The options available to the court are the same. And that basically is probation, which is generally for a period of 1 year, or referral to the Department of Juvenile Corrections. So that's kind of like a big picture overview. As far as them being filed as an adult, in order for a juvenile who is 16 years of old to be prosecuted as an adult, they would have to be a chronic offender, which means this would have to be their 3rd felony.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions? Yes.
Madam Chair, I was just wondering if there was anybody here from Pima County to address the issue, the bill.
Madam Chair, I do not see anybody from
Me
Pima
either.
County signed in to speak.
Okay, but any additional questions for Ms. Baker? None? Great, thank you. We do have the sponsor here, Representative Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Committee, for hearing the bill. This is a bill that I've been involved with for a number of years. It was first brought to my attention by County Attorney Bill Montgomery, who had a case where somebody, despite his girlfriend, decapitated her pet, and it wound up being pled down to a 5. I think it's important to understand that this is there's a lot of reasons to make it a 6, besides the fact that it can go down to a 5. One is I'm sorry, we go to misdemeanor. Yeah, the first is that as a misdemeanor, it's virtually nothing. So many petty offenses have been made misdemeanors that there's really no stigma attached to a misdemeanor. In my own town, Fountain Hills, when I was on the town council, they had a misdemeanor if you walked on a tennis court with a hard-soled shoe. That's how absurd it has gotten. I think the society, through the penal law, has to send a message to people and that the severity of the offense must be proportional to the harm done. And people who are torturing animals are doing extreme harm. I also think it's good to keep it at the 5 level so it can't be pled down to a misdemeanor, because I believe, I am told, that there are much better opportunities for probation and intensive supervision at the higher charge level. And I think these people need a lot of additional supervision. And the probation can also include, hopefully does include, some sort of a medical psychological treatment if the person is not just vicious and nasty, but in fact is disturbed. I think that the prior person testifying dealt with legal issues well. Let me delve into the political. This was, for years, we couldn't get this passed because there were issues with the ag community. They were concerned about a slippery slope argument. I think we've allayed those fears. I don't think anybody has gone negative from that community by stating that we're just really talking here about domestic pets, and we're not talking about agricultural issues, which is another area of law with their own unique problems of how to deal with it. Not that I'm condoning somebody who tortures,
No, but you're dealing
livestock.
with it in a
Right,
narrow scope.
Right. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Members, questions for the sponsor of the bill?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yeah. Mhm.
And thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Kavanaugh, for bringing up this bill. I do think the concept of the bill and the intent of the bill is a good bill. Folks who have their animals tortured in front of them, or parts of their animals, is very terrifying and traumatic, especially because there's a strong relationship. So I definitely get that piece. But I also want to make sure that we're addressing the other piece of this individual, preventing them from doing additional crimes of cruelty against these animals. So would you consider, and I know we haven't spoke on this bill personally with one another, but I'm a big fan of diversion programs, just because I think the goal is to get to the root cause of what is causing this individual to even do this crime, because it's not a normal thing to do. So are you open to maybe adding, making sure that they have to do a diversion program, and if not, if they refuse to, then maybe giving them a Class 5 felony? Is that something that you may be open to?
Yeah,
Representative?
Madam Chair, Representative, this bill, we've been working this bill for years, and a lot of these things come up. I don't have a problem with diversion programs, but tied to the particular individual. And I think a lot of people who do this type of behavior, like the person who decapitated his girlfriend's pet, they weren't crazy. They weren't somebody who should have diversion. They were somebody who needed punishment. Whereas there are a lot of people who do this who do need diversion. But I would rather have a diversion program, and I support that, be a standalone program that would not just apply to this particular incident, but would apply to any type of a crime where it appears that there were mitigating circumstances, perhaps related to the psychological state of the person, and diversion, serves the interest of justice, but also protection. So I'm all for it in some cases, but I prefer it to be a standalone bill, which I could support.
Thank you, Senator. And one more question, Madam Chair. My follow-up question: what are cities currently doing across the state? I don't know if there's examples of cities that are already tackling this issue. I don't know if you're aware of that, or maybe Maricopa County or the League of Cities may know.
Representative Kavanaugh.
Madam Chair, from a legal perspective or treatment?
Are there current citations? Are there current ordinances that address this issue, or is this something that we're just creating for the first time?
No,
Representative Kavanaugh.
Madam Chair, Senator Navarrete, I get my chambers all confused.
I do too. Don't worry. Everyone.
No, this is already a criminal law. So this is not a summons or anything. When you do something this serious, you get arrested, you go to the state courts. So all we're doing is we're upping it one level to prevent the kick down to a misdemeanor, which can result in not labeling the person for the harm that they did, and maybe not even giving the proper supervision that a higher charge could do.
Yeah. So it already exists. It's just going to be a steeper
Just
crime.
one.
Okay. Any additional questions? Any more questions for our sponsor? All right. Thank you.
I think I could run back to, I'm sharing a meeting, but I'll be
Okay,
back
but
for the next
your
one.
other one's coming up right after. All right. Okay. What would we do without this? We'd have the pages running. All
Madam
right.
Chair, there's
Issues.
one person signed in to speak, Tracy Miller, representing herself for the bill.
Great.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, good morning. My name is Tracy Miller. I am the Field Operations Manager for the Arizona Humane Society. I oversee our animal cruelty and investigative detail, as well as our rescue and ambulance team. I also bring to the table 20 plus years of law enforcement experience from the Phoenix Police Department. I stand before you in support of this bill, and I do appreciate your consideration in the matter. Every day, our emergency team and our medical technicians see heinous acts of crimes against animals. In fact, in 2018 alone, we responded to over 7,400 calls for service for animal cruelty by itself. You may have seen some of my team's worst days that they've had on the job on the news. An example of one of those would be the gentleman who decapitated his girlfriend's puppy and left the head on the table merely because she spoke to another man at work. Or the ASU student who almost beat his golden retriever puppy to death with a metal rod. Increasing penalties in the case of these extreme pet abuse situations ensures that prosecutors have the tools that they need to ensure that the punishment meets the crime. In fact, in a recent Arizona poll, 9 out of 10 voters overwhelmingly supported the legislation efforts to increase penalties in heinous cases. I also want to share with you the case that I went out on. I want you to imagine the family dog laying out on the back patio. Unfortunately, this dog is severely emaciated, dehydrated, has an open wound to the hind end that has gone untreated for several weeks, is laying next to a bucket of water but is too weak to stand on his own, and he can't even drink. My hope was to get this animal back to our Second Chance Animal Hospital to give him a second chance at life. Unfortunately, that didn't happen and he didn't make it. That case is still pending trial and the outcome of the abuser is still not determined, but that is one reason why I stand in front of you today asking for your support of this bill. This bill is your opportunity to make Arizona a safer place for people and for pets. And on behalf of the Arizona Humane Society and our partners in the Humane Legislation Coalition of Arizona, I thank you for your consideration. And with that, I'm open to questions.
Members, questions? All right, none. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Very compelling. Thank you.
Madam Chair, there's only one person left as if necessary.
Okay.
And then several people signed in for the bill and some against. However, this has a striker on it, and I'm not sure where those lie.
Yeah, so I think we got everybody. Okay. Then, Mr. Vice Chair, go ahead and read the bill.
Madam Chair, I move House Bill 2671 with a due pass recommendation.
Mr. Vice Chair, would you now move the strike everything amendment?
I move the strike everything amendment to House Bill 2671 dated March 22nd, 2019 at 2:08 p.m. be adopted.
Great, members, you've heard the motion of the adoption of the strike everything amendment. All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
All those opposed vote nay. Here's the ayes have it, do have it, so ordered. Mr. Vice Chair, please move the bill as amended.
Madam Chair, I move House Bill 2671 as amended receive a due pass recommendation.
Great. Secretary, please call the roll.
Aye.
Madam Chair, may I explain my vote?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'd like to say, make several points. Number one, cruelty to animals is horrible. We all, I'm sure, agree to that, and that people who abuse animals should be punished. Whether it's, and we should provide help for those who are sick in their minds enough to do this, or those who are sick in their attitudes need to be punished. I agree with the sponsor, however, that he mentioned the absurdity of so many laws, and I think we have a lot of laws in the books that shouldn't be there, and that perhaps the punishment is too severe. We've talked a lot in the last couple of years about judicial reform and how many people are in prison. We're making people felons for the rest of their life. Sometimes it's justifiable, but I question how effective our prisons are, how many people are returning to prison over and over again. And so that's a broader subject, I realize. I have a hard time increasing penalties. I think people should be penalized, but moving it to class 6, from a class 6 to a class 5, I'm very uncomfortable with, especially when it is legal to kill human babies, and we're making such a huge move on animals, and I think there is a difference. Animals are precious. Animals are our best friends, but I'm going to have to vote no.
Madam Chair, I'd like to explain my vote.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. This is a difficult bill to vote on because, on the one hand, pets are, special to family, and they become actually family members. And so cruelty to animals is bad. But also I would agree with Senator Farnsworth about upping the to a class 5 when we're not providing counseling and diversion plans. And I'm going to vote no, and we'll do some more research, and I'll try to find out from Pima County what is their diversion plan and how it's working before I vote on this bill on the floor. So I will vote no.
Please proceed.
Madam Chair, I would support the bill just for the fact that violence against animals is not okay. But I do think if you look at the research out there, there's a pretty strong correlation between violence against animals and violence against people. And so for both of those reasons, the fact that this person shouldn't have done whatever they did to the animal, but also probably is a danger to other people, or certainly research would suggest they're much more likely to be. I vote aye.
Yes, please proceed.
So again, I concur with everyone here in the room and, in this committee that violence against animals is not okay. But I do think that we have to address a much more deeper rooted issue before beginning to add additional felony counts on individuals. Yes, there is a strong correlation between domestic violence and animal cruelty, but I think that we need to figure out a way to, prevent that domestic violence in the home, prevent, further animals from being, abused. So I was a little disappointed to hear the sponsor didn't really want to entertain too much the idea of a diversion program, because I am curious to see how the programs will work and how we can get these folks from, being part of these crimes to not. So I am looking forward for more information from Maricopa County Attorney's Office. I'm looking for more information from PEMA. So there's still a lot of unanswered questions for myself. So for now, I'm going to vote no on this issue, but I do reserve the right to change my vote on the floor should I get the information that I need. So with that, I vote no.
Madam Chair, may I explain my vote?
Yes, please proceed.
I agree with our 3 no votes on the fact that we want to see a little bit more in the rehabilitation and focus on that versus just upping penalties. However, our prisons are for violent people. When we talk about judicial reform, I'd like to see our nonviolent criminals, those who maybe simply should not be there. That's where I think we should start the reform and bring those people home. But in cases of violence, and in particular, in my life, there was someone who abused an animal. It was never pursued, and they abused their children so much that those children are permanently damaged. And it is a terrible scenario that has affected my own life. And so let's continue the conversation. And with that, I vote aye.
Yeah, so I'll just make a comment. I'm not very torn on this bill. This bill makes a lot of sense to me. This wasn't mentioned, but it's important. You have to have intentionally, knowingly subjected an animal to cruel neglect. So this is not going to capture people who, accidentally kick the dog. These are very serious, violent crimes. And I think that making sure that the penalty reflects the serious nature of this kind of crime is appropriate. There is some flexibility within the Class 5 felony, but the important part to me here is that this is someone who intentionally and knowingly, so there are standards that have to be met, and I'm comfortable with it. And for those reasons, I will be voting aye today.
4 ayes, 3 nays, and 1 not voting.
Members, by your vote of 4 ayes, 3 nays, 1 not voting, you have given House Bill 2061. 2671 a due pass recommendation as amended, because this was a striker. Thank you. All right.